Hey Collective, it's Alan. I'm coming to you with a video that will be accompanying a post I'm releasing on LinkedIn that had a very interesting question I wanted to bring to the YouTube audience, which basically centered around this notion that we might actually have the process wrong in believing that the physical form that the soul experiences in the Great Earth Academy is the end result, as opposed to the possibility that it is just the beginning. That the post actually raised the question of what if it was an actual nursery in which the soul had to learn cause and effect before it was able to actually perform its actual functions within the universe. Stemming from the consideration that philosophically and theologically speaking, we have come to understand that there is something that awaits us on the other end, but I've always thought of it as an end result as opposed to the beginning phase for us. And the reason I wanted to bring this post to the YouTube audience as well as LinkedIn was the basic understanding that we as a collective consciousness have surrounding the idea that we as souls evolve through the physical world from mineral to plant and then plant to animal and then animal to human, where we in that particular kingdom then are the amalgamation of those experiences with the ability to speak reality into existence and the power that comes with the cause and effect of our actions and what we do day to day. And our understanding of karma and all of the different things that can kind of mire us down into the 3D reality, never really allowing us to release ourselves to the ability to fly above the chaos and the poison that fills our airwaves and so forth, and keeps us grounded into the state of insecurity or fear from going into what's next as an evolutionary model, with the main consideration being that we rely heavily on the physicality of what we can see as opposed to what we can perceive in other senses. And so what I really wanted to do with this post was raise very interesting questions, which is basically this. What happens when we graduate from the Earth Academy? Where do we go? And how do we apply for the vocations or jobs that we want to partake in as the soul evolves? Because if the universe is as vast as they say it is, then it can't be just empty space. There must be consciousness there that we cannot perceive because of our limited mindset of only depending on what is physically seeable. And it raises a very interesting question to people who have other sensories that are quite progressive. People who have an ability to kind of see the future or at least analyze the day-to-day interactions for signs and synchronicities to point them in a direction that helps guide them through the universe and through the world. And the basic understanding from esoteric faith and actually Christianity that there is a heaven, and then from theosophy and theology and philosophy that there were these great schools that once existed that spoke to this ideology and to this conceptual thought form that no longer exists. And could that be the antidote to the willful state of ignorance that we now live in, where all we're seeing is the worst of humanity? But what if that's a skill set test for the soul? What if the reality is that they are looking, they being whatever you consider the higher consciousness to be, for the vessels of light who engage in the thought forms that raise humanity upwards, and an assessment analysis of what they can bring to the table after they leave the Great Earth Academy? And what can we do as spiritual beings and as vessels of light on the earthly plane to help other people come to understand that this is just the beginning, not the end? And would that release people of the prison type mentality that Earth is a prison as opposed to a school? And is it now time then for us to ground the energies, maybe bringing back some of those philosophical schools and blending them with theology into a format that helps people ascend the madness of the lower dimension of just the physicality of the knee-jerk things that we need, like sex and all that stuff, and getting over that to a state where we are now capable consciously to form advanced thought forms that move the species forward in new and delightful ways? And how that would kind of explain the turmoil that we're going through with so many things across our screens being all about dissension, neo-Nazism and racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those things, then allowing us to rise above that and present something new to the collective that can then possibly guide them into a higher state of awareness that allows them to consider the fact that we have gotten it wrong. What if this is a nursery? What if literally for the soul, this is just its school and it's doing its school work, and every day that we choose to do different things, that we are either passing or flunking our own tests that our soul is trying to get us into alignment with? And what if the reality that we are not sensing because we rely so heavily on the 3D glasses we wear, that the reality is that the reason we can't see the rest of the universe is because it doesn't exist in the way we think it does. Because we're relying only on sight as opposed to feeling and understanding, the inner knowing that comes with the advanced wisdom of masters and teachers that have come before us, that have left up breadcrumbs saying that there's something that awaits us on the other side. In theology, they call it heaven. In philosophy, they call it the great schools of Aristotle and Da Vinci, and all of the amazing predecessors that have come before us have left us these signals that there's something that awaits us. And the question that was begged in this post and to you all is, what if they're trying to tell us that this doesn't end here, that it's just the beginning, that once we have passed our exams, that we are allowed to then file or apply for jobs in a higher contextual thought form that doesn't exist in the 3D because we're but a nursery? Wouldn't that explain why we can't see other advanced races? It's because we're stuck in the third dimensional limited space of physicality, whereas they may exist in other forms that we can't perceive because we haven't graduated yet. We haven't passed the test. We haven't proven ourselves to be of somehow service to the greater good and to the reality that exists outside of the matrix. There are so many people who believe in the matrix type structure, and so many people who believe they're imprisoned, when the reality is that that's a mental state and where we don't advance forward. And a lot of what we're seeing across the airwaves, whether it's left or right, is people constantly bickering and arguing about things that really to many of us is not even applicable to us anymore because of where we are as an evolutionary model. And we're finding ourselves deviating into two groups. One that will pass the test and are moving upwards to a different state of understanding and awareness, and the others who want to hold on to an old paradigm that does not exist. So wherever they're going, we're not. And does it then raise the question that we all must ask ourselves, if we are the teachers and guides to the new understanding of what awaits us on the other side of all of these trials and tribulations? You don't test students this harshly if there's nothing there for them. And the basic understanding that I've come to put into my own reasoning is this. What if there are functions within the universe that are being offered to us if only we stood still for a minute long enough to meditate on it and realize that if we evolve through the mineral, plant, animal, and then human kingdom, that the soul has its own experience that it will have after the physicality, after the costume, after the weight of the third dimension is dropped. What if there are jobs and tasks that await us as a collective on the other side of this? Not that we want to die or anything, but at least preparing the collective consciousness for the understanding that don't lose faith or hope in a better way when the reality, all the signs around us are saying that there's something that's happening for a reason. And what if the reason is to help society and humanity prepare for the reality check that we are but infants in the sea, the vast sea of the universe, and that we are about to have our minds blown in some way, shape, or form? What could we do as individuals with that basic understanding? What could we do for society in helping them understand that this isn't the end, this is the beginning? How much hope and how much light would that bring of a lot of people who live in fear of whatever's next into the unknown? And one of the great things about the unknown is that it's space in which you can create. That is what creativity is. That is what having a high IQ is. It's the ability to use a particular sense of yours in a very particular way that adds something to the world or possibly to the universe. And what if we are but passing tests that make us understand that when we do such things, we co-create with the universe that is responding to our scholastic experience in a way that helps us advance up the classes and then help other students in cohort groups or in collectives to help them understand that there's so much more happening that we can't see, and that the physicality of the seeing is believing is holding us back as an evolutionary being. And so what I really wanted to do with this video and the post as an overall arc was this. What if it's time that we just bring back the advanced schools that once existed? What if we are meant to work together, whoever's watching this, and build schools that don't just deal with a particular theosophy or a particular theology or a particular philosophy, but a branch of science and faith that come together and create a theosophy that expands across all faith and all science, in order to bring back the days where Aristotle and Socrates and all of those great minds not only are reborn, but exist within the student body that studies their pathway in order to advance the species, because that's the last time we really truly jumped in evolution. Science is great. We need science, and with AI and all that stuff, we're going to have a lot of time on our hands. And if the promised land that they're giving us is that we're all going to be, in some sort of utopian society, we need to be prepared of what we're going to do with that time and that space when everything is pulled from under us. Do we fall apart and cave in and have horrible thoughts of fear and insecurity? Or do we find ways to advance ourselves independently of what is happening in the world? Which led to the question of why wouldn't we then build the schools that accommodates the advanced awareness and understanding that will come with that much time on our hands? And are we just slacking off slightly by not seeing the potentiality and all of the possibilities before us and what we can reground into the earthly plane that advances everyone equally forward? Right? Because you can't make a student go to college. But a soul wants to leave the physical world. It wants to experience what's beyond the physicality of it. And we know that because of how dire things can get and the consequences that come with our lives. But what if we're able to help teach each other different ways of thinking or different ways of being that then allow the person to feel less and less weight as they ascend the madness into an organized thought form that helps them understand that we are part of the all. In fact, many believe that we are in the mind of the all. And as the all moves forward, the universe responds, and we co-create with it as we move collectively forward. For a long time, theosophically and philosophically, the question has always been posed that when judgment is passed, whatever you believe judgment to be, what if it's just your final grades? Remember, the fear of other people that have lived in wrong alignment is that it's catastrophe to them because they lose everything that wasn't real to begin with. But to a person in right alignment, judgment just means I get my final grades. I get to know if I graduate. I get to walk across the stage in my cap and gown, and I get to then pick a vocation in a field that I want to go work in. And if you study some of the more esoteric theosophies and some of the things that they represent, they talk about different pathways that are presented to different vessels of light upon graduation. But how do we then apply that to our day-to-day? Because then that becomes the next leg of the journey that we are all facing. So we can sit here and say that the world is coming to an end and there's all this stuff. Well, a lot of bad shit has to be burnt away. And if you think I am enjoying this neo-Nazi fucking script that's going on in the background, I absolutely am not. But we've spoken to how karmically that has to play out in the way that it is playing out so that we can see the villains on full stage and they can be held accountable. All of that has to be worked out because, as we know, first world nations absorbed a lot of the Nazi people in order to get intel and all other stuff. So all of that has negative karma to it. So there are things that are going to happen in our physical world that can make us weakened or make us feel insecure. And now they're targeting different minorities and people who speak out against it. All that stuff is going to happen. But what if we take a higher road on it and start giving people something else to absorb as opposed to all the poison that fills our airwaves? What if we start working together and building the content that really uplifts humanity into being able to understand that whatever's going to happen in the physical world has to play out the way it's meant to, but that we're setting a new stage in which we can grow in spite of it all. In fact, if you look back over human history, one of the things that you'll notice is whenever there's a huge leap in some sort of technology or understanding within the collective consciousness, there's tension. And as that tension explodes, a new reality forms itself on top of that, layering it with opportunities for advanced students to then do advanced placement classes and then get into master's programs and get into graduate school programs where they get their doctorate. I think of like amazing people like Dr. Maya Angelou, who obviously was here doing her doctorate, and when she left, who knows, she's probably the a reigning queen. And Jesus and Buddha, all of these amazing, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, they did a lot of sacrifice. But a lot of the time that we as parents or as adults sacrifice things for ourselves is usually for our children, so that they don't have to sacrifice it. And so they can stand on our shoulders and we hold them up. Well, what if we're being given the opportunity to do that while we're alive? And to understand that the awareness that we are coming into is that something awaits us that's much bigger than just a third dimensional reality. And the questions that that poses then releases humans from this detrimental fear and allows them to possibly look forward to whatever awaits them. And in a generation like the baby boomers that is so vast that will be leaving the academy soon because of natural selection and so forth and just age, it would be really helpful for us as younger people and people who understand this concept the new generations coming in to help them feel easy or at ease with the fact that it's not the end, it's just the beginning. And our understanding now is starting to be much more comprehensive of that reality, because we do believe in philosophy and we do believe in all of these advanced thought forms that exist, but how many of us actually engage it in this time setting, right? There's so much distraction going on. As far as they're concerned, as far as the airwaves are concerned, all of the content is geared towards destruction, division, keeping us small, keeping us at odds with each other, fighting with each other, doing anything they can to be perverted and corrosive and just destructive to humanity. And the reality is you don't have to invest in that journey. I disconnect all the time from the news. I can read it and I understand what I need to understand. I don't watch any of the talking heads that are paid to keep us divided. I instead look for the people who are bringing us towards each other, which is why I've posted so many wonderful things about Tyler Perry. I've posted amazing things about Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. It's not the political party affiliation. It has to do with what are they doing to uplift humanity, and are they mirroring things to us that allows us to grow from the knowledge of what we absorb. In the same way that I read books so that I can avoid experiences that I don't want by looking at the journey of another person and going, oh, I don't want to do that. That's why books are so important, right? They bring you ideas and thought forms that expand your consciousness. And in the process, if you're doing your due diligence and doing real study, you avoid the pitfalls that other people have left you in their storyline. And so you stand on their shoulders. And you stand on all of our ancestors' shoulders so that maybe we don't have to suffer in the same way that they did, because our awareness and understanding lets us know in advance what's coming. And so in that preparation, wouldn't it be great to have people have outlets in which we engage them analytically and through wisdom and knowledge, help ground their physical experiences into an understanding of why they went through what they went through and the amazing blessings that came from those lessons. It is not a mistake that the word lesson is in the word blessing. Once we accrue the information and we stop making certain mistakes, we alleviate ourselves from that burden and we start to work that karma off. And that's a very interesting subject, because if you're going to learn the cause and effect to creation, you're going to have to learn the physical cost of it first, because it anchors you into reality. And in order to move forward, you have to learn that you cannot be punished if you don't transgress. And then there are times in the physical world and in the spiritual world where you're going to have to stand on the mountain for things you truly believe in. But if you don't have the concept or understanding that there are other avenues and other vessels of light out there that are working in similar fields as you are, then you can't bring the community back together that they have tried to destroy. And that is the moral of this particular class. I cannot escape the feeling that they are doing everything they can to keep us as divided, because they can't stop evolution itself. And they can see that humanity is not putting up with this shit anymore. And so the more that they double down on it, the more the divine presents us with other options. And the reality then becomes that we may indeed be in a nursery. Bullies everywhere. And until the humanity stands up to the bullies, then it's really hard for them to find their footing in this new epoch that is emerging within us. And it's not something that happened, overnight. It was gradual. It started with Generation X, and each subsequent generation has been less and less interested in the old paradigm and have been presenting other ways of life that have advanced the species. And so is it now time to engage all of them in a new way of looking at the world that embraces a higher knowledge understanding of the cosmos and the possibility that we are but in a nursery, in an embryonic sac, waiting to prove ourselves in a school setting to then be released upon the universe that we can't understand because we're relying on our peepers. Eyes are great. They're beautiful to look at. They say it's the windows to the soul. But what if the soul is presenting you with the opportunity to live as a soul as opposed to just a human being? To remove the separation between you as a physical avatar and your soul, and instead allow the soul to sit perfectly present in you, looking out at the world. And what can those type of souls do in building schools and expanding consciousness in a way that brings the world together? Which is why I've always said there are teachers dressed as students. But getting your soul and your body into alignment is a little bit tricky because your ego gets involved. And one of the things about ego is the ego will sacrifice the avatar in order to be right. and will take no accountability for it, blaming everyone else for it, right? That's typically how the ego is. I want to be rich and famous. That's great, but you don't want to deal with the consequences of losing your anonymity. And you don't want to deal with the consequences of people bugging you all the time. You just want the money. Well, the thing with money is that it's corruptible. Money is a corruptible source. And though we will never live, at least as far as I can tell in this reality, without needing to at least pay our bills and so forth, understand that you sometimes have to sacrifice a bit of the comfort in order to do the due diligence of study, which is what I did and what many of us do, which is during the pandemic, many of us went inwards and a lot of us went to mental health therapy. We started to explore spirituality. We had no way to avoid ourselves because there was nothing else going on. And this seems to be the reality check of what did we do at that time. Because no matter what we say about the world around us, it is changing. And the more that they fight and the more that they bite down against us as people, the more that we understand that there must be a reason why they're double downing on it. They must be terrified of what we will find if we build the communities back together. So if you're a philosophical student, this is the time to shine, to talk about philosophy. If you're a theological mastermind, then go ahead and speak to theology. If you are a branch that speaks to theosophy, maybe it's time to evolve what you're doing instead of just being localized on L.S. Bailey or on esotericism or Christianity, to maybe start cross-referencing things and start working with people of like minds from different houses that bridge the patchwork that we need in order to help humanity rise unitively. Because one of the things about us is that we are a family. Whether we like it or not, whether you are black, whether you are gay, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're a girl, whether you're a woman, whatever it is, we are a family. And if we are indeed a nursery, we're siblings. We're the children of something greater than ourselves. And even if we were never meant to be here, they're not going to punish the children of the abomination, let's say. Let's say that we engage this idea that we were not meant to be here, and someone broke some rules. Because remember, there's stories in the Bible about how there were beings who intermingled with humanity and caused all of this havoc and stuff. What if the reality is that though that may have happened, that humanity still was supposed to exist, and that we are given the opportunity to advance to the higher levels if we're willing to do the work? And a lot of it has to do with be willing to stand in front of the world and be like, hey, I'm a little wacky. Some people consider me woo-woo. But at the end of the day, that woo-woo is what brings the world together. It brings people hope. It brings harmony to chaos, and it speaks to knowledge and wisdom that is far outside the norm for the everyday person. And what if we were able to work together to bring that to other people, to the everyday person? People who may not be aware yet that they're being distracted and bamboozled, right? When you bring it in a nurturing way towards humanity, they can take it in without having blocks on them. And they understand it in a different context, and so they're willing to work with it. And that's the aim of where I think we're going. So in the end, what the post really wanted to say to you all is, what if we're backwards? What if this is just the beginning and we're being prepared for all of the 96% of the universe that we don't see or understand? It's in dark matter. What if we don't see it because we're not meant to until we pass the tests? And what if the tests aren't as harsh as we're making it? We just are fighting with our ego. And how do we then represent that in storylines and content to the world that makes them not afraid to engage the questions, right? What is so wrong about asking a question like this? Because you're not depending on the physicality of the world, so you become less subservient to people who try to take things away from you, the physical, and you just go, okay, take it away. And then you start looking at things differently because you start to realize that no matter what, you can survive anything. In fact, most of the people who are looking at my content have gone through insurmountable amounts of shit. And the fact that you're still standing here is a testament to your soul. And so how do we engage the everyday person to be reintroduced to the soul that's always been there guiding them? And how do we bring them content that does not offend their theology or their religious standpoints, but instead embraces it in a wholeheartedly way that helps them rise to understand that other people have that faith in other departments? And how do we bring content to them that is the antidote to the poison that the worst of us is trying to spread across all airwaves? The only way to do that is to serve as its opposition without being forceful. One of the things that we're learning as we go navigate through this particular sea of uncertainty is that people are tired of being told what to do all the time. And what they want is opportunity to think for themselves. They want the freedom to stand as vessels of light within their own world and co-create with the divine in ways that are healthy and community building with each other. It's the one thing that happened since the pandemic is it destroyed our sense of community. Everyone became so isolated and alone that I finally just looked at it and I go, oh, well, that makes sense in a nursery. If we really think about being in a nursery type setting and you are in the universe, then we understand it as an individual level, as a point of light, that we would also feel alone. Because as a collective, as a species, we don't see any other advanced races because we're depending on our eyes. We don't understand the universe because it's made up of dark matter. And yet we are of color. We are in technicolor. And so could it be that we're on stage in the nursery proving ourselves to whatever you believe the higher power to be? And what heaven and the philosophical schools actually represent is the advancement of the soul as it evolves out of the third dimension, making the third dimension but a stepping stone for humanity. And would that really harm society to consider, especially with so much of the generations exiting the academy? Could we be compassionate to them in a way that they were not compassionate to us, by helping them understand that there's something waiting for them? All the signs are there, right? So what can we do to be there for each other and to help other people understand higher conceptual thought forms that is not offensive to them, but rather inclusive? And how do we bring the right minds together to move that needle forward? Because humanity is facing a trial. Can they evolve? Or are they going to be sucked back down to hell with these disgusting people? And there is a clear distinction between the two. In fact, we saw over, I think it was last weekend or the weekend before that, millions of people go against the grain and be like, I don't care what happens. I'm not putting, all of that is momentum. And it keeps building. And no matter what we face and no matter what adversity comes our way, we have to stand on the mountain, but we don't have to do it alone. They're banking on you feeling isolated and alone. And what better way to bring people together than through education? And education is advancing. It's not just about getting your general education. It's about how do we get souls to understand collegiate type things? How do we bring people more into charitable work and have them still be able to pay their bills? How do we have them have the time to raise their families and study spiritually so that they can evolve? The best way to do it is to bring it for free. Bring them content that expands their mind in a way that they maybe never had considered before, and that they can take it in small doses so that they can evolve with us. Humanity is a family, and like I said, whether you like it or not, families don't always get along. In fact, most families get torn apart by politics and religion. So what we can do as a peer group is represent the opposition of that, which is theology and philosophy, which advances the science brains and advances the religious minds into a state where they are still holding what's true for them and stand on the mountain firmly, but are able to consider other possibilities because it speaks to them wherever they are on the ladder. And that, I think, is the future of humanity. So in closing, what I really wanted to do with this piece is to just point out the most obvious thing. The universe is not seeable to us because we rely on our eyes. And though for science that's a challenge, for the rest of us, it's not that big of a deal. We have moments where we have intuitive hits and we have a higher concept of mind. Sometimes we hear the little voice say, why, don't do that, don't do that. All of that is outside of our realm of understanding. And until we're ready to explore it in conversation, even in debate, then none of the species will move forward, and they will continuously believe that the Great Earth Academy is a prison because no one's bringing them content that shows them otherwise. And that is the challenge that I give to all of you. So as I close, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope you really think about the possibilities that it represents as far as helping other people. One, not feel alone. Two, understand that this is not the end. And three, that we have to engage the possibilities in the realm of consciousness itself, which is why studying collective consciousness is so important, because we've moved from the understanding of the unconscious collective, the collective unconscious, and now we're moving into a conscious state of awareness. So what is that consciousness asking of us, and how can we be of service to its development over time? Have a good day. Bye.